All right. Welcome to another Buzz Beat. We are live on YouTube. Thanks for joining for another episode. This is Richie, and I'll be joined by Brian. We are recording this on the tail end of the Panthers game, so I'm sure many of our Charlotte listeners are probably tuned into that game. But as we were speaking pre-recording, we were already ruling this game out, ruling this season out. It's just not been a fun watch for these first 2.5 games seen. So
It's not great when you don't have a first round pick either in the upcoming draft. But let's see. This is a question for a whole other day, and I am certainly not the one to answer these things. But boy, the David Tepper era. I don't know, where does he rank amongst bad owners in pro sports? Because it's not been a booming start the first 4 or 5 years here.
he came in hot. He came in with a lot of energy, and I feel like the city rallied around him and just it liked his involvement. But like from an on field and stuff, like and even that Rock Hill thing with the practice facility, how that just kind of went
a debacle.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, the practice facility, Matt Rule, the way they've handled the quarterback position, they don't strike me as a team that prior to this season had much of a plan, and now it seems like there's somewhat of a plan, but it has to work with Bryce or else the plan is really bad. So best of luck to the Panthers and the diehard fans. There's a lot of people that care about that team a lot.
Yeah.
So I want them to be good, but man, it's been hard times recent years.
Exactly. And it's not like we can act like the Hornets have been all that great either, but we are
No,
here.
certainly not.
We are here to talk about them anyway. We're going to discuss some trade rumors that they probably won't even be a part of, but we are here to entertain those ideas anyway. So we'll talk about a little bit about Tyler Herro and maybe a little bit about Buddy Hield. I know that was kind of like not really a rumor or report by any means, but just an idea of him potentially being on the trade block. So these trade rumors, first off, Jake Fisher has reported that if Portland ultimately does business with Miami, he stated that the Jazz, the Bulls, the Hornets, and the Nets are considered teams that would be involved in facilitating a trade, and they could potentially land Tyler Herro. So they would obviously not be a team that's just trading straight up with Portland. They'd be a third team or a fourth team. And I feel like this trade saga, Brian, has just gone on way too long. And it almost feels like Portland doesn't even want to deal with Miami. Like that's his preferred destination. But everything that I've heard, like Portland wants to deal with other teams. Do you get that sense too, or am I just kind of reading the reports wrong?
Yeah, no, I thought Chris Haynes had a report last week, Richie, that said Joe Cronin, believe he's the GM. I'm not sure what his official title is, but the guy that is, runs basketball ops for the Blazers, that he was at the time, he was not entertaining calls with with Miami's front office, which we'll see. I do think ultimately Lillard is going to end up in Miami. I do kind of think that what's the most recent developments, like with Toronto, Chicago, Philadelphia, I do wonder, and maybe I'd be curious to know how you feel about this. If this is Portland sort of like a little bit of a leverage play to see if they can squeeze anything else extra out of Miami in the trades. I mean, it does sort of seem like we've known what Miami's trade package has been for a while now. But if the Blazers can get better stuff from other teams, then it would be irresponsible for Joe Cronin to not doing his due diligence, and also trying to get the best offer for Damian Lillard. I know there's been a lot of discussion about because Dame's given a decade of his Hall of Fame career to this franchise, and that they owe it to him now to move him to the right place or where he wants to go. And I hear that. I just don't necessarily agree with it. Damian Lillard signed a massive extension. And when he did that, he punted on his autonomy to play where he wants to play. He had the opportunity to have, to have gone into free agency, and that was something he opted not to do. And so you kind of can't have both. You can't sign for the massive dollar amount and then also say trade me here and only here. It doesn't really work like that. So um I still do think we'll see Dame in Miami one way or the other, but um this is an interesting time period because I'll be curious to see if Portland is like very serious about fielding these offers from Toronto, Chicago, etc., or Philadelphia, who we talked about some on the last episode with Spencer, or if this is sort of like a posturing or a leverage move on their part to try to wring a little bit more out of Miami. But Portland has an idea of like where they want to go. Like they got Scoot Henderson. It's funny that the Hornets, I think, played a role in all of this. And it would be funny if they came back on the back end and ended up like facilitate the trade too, because I just I wonder what the urgency would look like if Brandon Miller falls to 3, Scoot Henderson gets taken by the Hornets at 2, Miller falls to 3, and maybe who knows, maybe the Blazers even go with Amen Thompson at 3, as opposed to Brandon Miller, and maybe that impacts how they handle things with Dame going forward. But with Henderson and with Shaedon Sharpe, they've got like a really awesome, exciting young backcourt to build around. And they've got other guards in house too. Like they've got to figure out what they want to do with Anthony Simons. And it doesn't feel like they can really do any of that until they move forward with Lillard. But time I do think is on their side to an extent. I suppose there could be some awkwardness come, the start of training camp and media day if Dame is still there. But in the long run, they've got their like young backcourt. So it's like this is going to shake out eventually one way or the other, and they're going to get some stuff to build around those guys with. So I don't know. What is your take on sort of like the latest of the Dame saga? It does feel like everyone got back from summer vacation 2 weeks ago, and like that's just lit the fuse again here.
Yeah, it could be posturing, but I also feel like when you look at Miami's roster, they don't have a ton of young guys that would be enticing to me. Like if I had Dame, I was trying to trade like the guy from UCLA, what's his name? Jacquez, like
Jaime Jaquez.
Jaquez.
Yeah.
Other than that, like I don't really see like Highsmith, but he's not really like a young guy.
Nikola Jovic, their first round pick last year, maybe. But at this point, he's at least in terms of like what he can do on an NBA floor is largely still unknown. And he is obviously very, he's quite young. There's a lot of, there's international tape on him too. But so that's a guy that you could say is like a bit of an upside play. But yeah, that is not that's not a roster that is set for the long term. Like they need to maximize Butler now, which is why it does feel like there's a lot of urgency for them to swing this Dame trade. And they lost they lost several good players this offseason. Like Max Strus signed with Cleveland. Excuse me. Gabe Vincent signed with the Lakers. So like they're missing 2 of their key rotation guys from a season ago. And so I don't know, like they just, the East is, I think, wide open to an extent, I guess, but they're not in a great spot right now until they're able to like swing this deal and try to keep as much of that roster intact. So you could see why they're trying to, hold on to their leverage and try to get this thing done. But I don't love their position at the moment, other than it just seems like inevitable that this is going to happen, that like Dame's going to get, what he wants, and he'll be awesome in Miami. Like when he gets there, like he's a ridiculously good player too.
And so, when I was mentioning like the young players in Miami, it almost feels like they have to get a third team involved, whether that is Chicago, whether that is Philadelphia or the Raptors or the Suns. And if Charlotte gets involved as a third team with Miami involved as well, there have been some links with Tyler Herro and the Hornets. So I guess we'll start there, Brian. I mean, I don't have any fake trades. I tried so hard to come up with a fake trade on the NBA trade machine. I even included a 4th team. It was very difficult to make all the money match and work and try to get fair value. It was tough. It was difficult. And I was trying to, balance it as perfectly as possible, even without the picks. Like I was just trying to get the players. It was difficult. So I applaud these GMs when they finally get this thing done, if it happens to be a 3-team deal. But let's just talk about Tyler Herro, the player. Let's just assume, somehow he lands up in Charlotte. Like, is that a player that fans should get excited about? And we'll go ahead and just entertain that idea. I think when I think about Tyler Herro, I think his strong suit is like his shot making. Like he's different than Rozier in the sense that Rozier is more of an off ball gravity guy, and that's what Rozier does best. And it's not that Tyler Herro can't run off screens. I just get the sense that he probably prefers to have the ball in his hands a little bit more often than kind of running off of screens. Like he's a talented pull up shooter.
That's
In
for sure. Yeah.
range. Like he may over dribble at times, but you almost wonder, like, run some pick and rolls with him. Against a drop coverage, he could hit that mid range shot. You run pick and roll with PJ. It's kind of like pick your poison. Interesting combo there, both being, I guess, Kentucky teammates, right? So, it forces the defense to make a quick decision. If there's any confusion, Herro can definitely take advantage of that too. And he's got the dribble moves to get, bigs on their heels, and he uses that to his advantage. And it's funny, we talk about defensive stuff and how Hornets need that in the worst way possible. They don't have a lot of guys on the roster that can be an impact player. And we mentioned his name a lot in a recent episode, and it was not necessarily in a good way. He's below average. Like I think that's pretty fair to say. And we see some limitations with him on that end when going through the Mark Williams film that we did a couple weeks ago. So that's my quick breakdown of him. I think he's a very good shot maker. I think he's a guy that could feast in the mid range. But Brian, what do you see from Herro as a player? And is he a guy that you would value on this roster?
Not not necessarily. I mean, you hit some of the high points, Richie. Like he is a big time shot maker. He makes tough shots. He can create his own shot. I think he's grown a little bit as a pick and roll playmaker for others. Though I don't think it's like an elite level as far as him just like give him the ball, let him like break down the defense. Like I don't think he's that, though I do think he's earned some pick and roll reps. I kind of wish his usage would actually get tilted closer to like what Rozier's does look like. I actually think he would be sort of interesting more as and certainly, in Miami, you're going to get all the handoffs, you're going to get the split action, like that type of stuff. But I kind of think he should lean even more into like the off ball move or pathway. But as you were noting, it doesn't seem like that's what he wants to do. It does seem like he wants to, certainly that's part of it, but he also wants to be a guy that, is getting his spread pick and roll looks, X number of them per game, sort of like built into the offense. As good as Herro is offensively, he can really, really shoot. He's been an incredible corner 3-point shooter throughout his career. He can hit it from off the dribble above the break. He's got the mid-range game. He's excellent in like the runner floater zone. But I think you would run into, I think a LaMelo Herro backcourt offensively has a lot of the same limitations that the LaMelo Rozier backcourt has had, barring some elite from one of those two guys. And they're both very, very young. And obviously, I think LaMelo has a lot of upside, and maybe Herro has some stuff he can tap into. Like he's still probably 23, 24 years old. Like he's just now heading into his fifth season in the NBA, which will be year one of his 4-year, $120 million contract extension, which will go into effect next season. So, but as far as those limitations go, like this is not someone that I think you just give him the ball and he's going to run 50 pick and rolls per game, and that's going to turn into good offense. I think you've got to design some stuff up for him. You got to scheme him some of these looks, and he doesn't fix any of the rim pressure concerns. And this is a guy who, according to Cleaning the Glass, 15% of his shots were at the rim last season. For his career, under 20% of his field goal attempts have come at the rim. That's a pretty low number. And obviously, like he's a great shooter from every level of the floor, but he's smaller. He's not an incredible athlete. And so I do think he's just like limited in terms of like half court offensive creation impact. And if that's the case, that doesn't mean he's not a useful guy to pair with LaMelo. Like we've seen the Hornets squeeze a top 10, a top 6 offense with a lot of LaMelo and Terry Rozier involvement in those looks. And hypothetically, like Herro and Mark Williams could be like a nice pick and roll battery. Like it's like you could see some ways he would fit, but like long term, I just don't really see it as a backcourt that you pair together, even because it's going to have limitations on the offensive end, and that would obviously be its like strong side. Because defensively, this is someone that's always going to have a target on his back. You see it every year when the Heat are in the playoffs, and I mean he wasn't really involved much in the postseason this year as the Heat played better and went to the NBA Finals. I don't pin that on Herro, but it is something to sort of like at least take note of. But this is a guy that routinely you've seen people are going to try to get him in a switch and go after him. Like he's just got a target on his back. And, I do think if the Hornets were ever in a postseason scenario where this was an issue, they would love for that to be the case, right? Because it would mean that they were in a postseason series that turned into a half court slugfest, but just, I don't see the physicality, the screen navigation, the one-on-one defensive impact. Like I just don't see it there. It's another skinnier guard that doesn't really defend at a high level. And I would need to like watch more of Miami to sort of like get a better feel for what his like team defense looks like. Certainly the Heat have played a lot of zone with Eric Spoelstra and Tyler Herro there, perhaps in part to try to keep him out of some of those matchup issues. But I would like the game that we watched, the Mark Williams versus Miami game from February earlier this year, just in the Williams clips alone that we showed, which were probably like 5 or 6 offensive clips, like multiple defensive breakdowns from Herro. So that's a little bit of cherry picking on my end. I would need to watch more of his film and sort of like study him more off ball to get a better feel for it. But I don't think the like point of attack, screen navigation, one-on-one defense is a strength by any means. So it would ultimately depend on, I think, who the other ball handler would be in the mix with them. Like if Brandon Miller, ended up becoming a star and a guy that could actually give you some downhill creation. I mean, I don't know. I think I've been pretty like hesitant to mention too many like long-term scenarios with Miles Bridges back as like a foundational piece. And I've avoided that for a lot of obvious reasons, but Bridges is a guy that is a pressure point on the rim, and you could probably build a good half court offense if you got, the Miles Bridges from 2022 with LaMelo and Tyler Herro. I still think you have lots of defensive concerns, but I just don't love the fit offensively. I have big concerns for it defensively. There's some stuff you could do offensively that would work very well. That would come from the LaMelo Herro or the LaMelo Rozier stylistic playbook. But I still think you would run into a lot of the same issues that this team has throughout the last 3 seasons, even when the offense has been like a good to very good regular season offense.
Yeah, I agree with 99% of what you just said there. He does not solve the issues in which the Hornets have been plagued with in the past handful of seasons. And I do think that like if he was involved in this trade for Charlotte, it would have to come at the expense of Terry Rozier. Like you aren't trading Herro for him to come off the bench at that 4-year, $120 million number that you just said. Like, and for matching purposes, like Rozier makes a ton of sense to be included in a 3-team, 4-team deal. So let me ask you this question. Like, even if he doesn't really move the needle for you, does the fact that he is 5-6 years younger than Rozier, albeit he's locked in for an extra year out into 26, 27, does that like sway you anymore? Or is it too much of a lateral move where his shot making and maybe incremental steps on defense just aren't going to sway you enough?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yes, I think so. I think it would be a little bit too lateral. I mean, look, I wanted them to draft Scoot Henderson. So like anything short of that right now just doesn't sound all that appealing to me at the moment. And I guess the one case you could make is that perhaps Herro could retain has more trade value 2 years. I mean, I think he would have more trade value 2 years from now than Terry Rozier, because Herro would be in the prime of his career. He would have 2 years on his contract, not one. So like maybe you could squeeze something else out of him, and so there's that. And in the interim, you could have you could build potentially build a decent offense with LaMelo and Herro as your like the all sauce, backcourt of the Hornets. But I guess having like a Mark Williams type defensively at center, assuming he continues to develop and improve, could be a guy that would like make up for some of those perimeter deficiencies, navigating screens and getting over screens, that type of stuff, by just having his size in the paint and at the rim. But no, I don't know. How do you feel about Herro as a hypothetical addition, Richie?
I do think it's a lateral move, but I would be more interested in it because he is a younger player than Rozier, obviously. Like, I think that's just naturally you have more room for improvement. But yeah, I mean, if things don't work out the way that you want it to, he's not solving the issues on the defensive side of the court. Does it make a ton of sense? But he would have more trade value, like you said. And I guess I also wonder too, like, it's not going to strictly be like a Rozier for Herro straight up. Like, for us to kind of be facilitating, we'd probably have to send something else Portland's way to kind of entice the deal and try to. They probably want a young player like JT Thor or maybe the second round pick. I'm not really, well, I guess if we have those.
Thor's the kind of guy I could see them wanting to take a flyer on for sure. He would make some sense for them, I think. I guess there is one. I guess it's worth at least like entertaining the possibility that like if they did trade for Tyler Herro, which again, not advocating for, but like if you have Herro, LaMelo, Miller at the 1, 2, 3, like that's your starting group a couple seasons from now if Rozier and Hayward are out the door. So it's those three guys with PJ and Mark Williams. I suppose there's like interesting 4-round 1 stuff you could do. You've got if Miller develops the way you hope, all of a sudden you've got 3 guys of different sizes that can run pick and roll, like, high volume pick and roll. I'm not certain that Miller is going to develop like that, to be clear. Like I've stated that multiple times before the draft and after the draft, but I suppose there's some scenario where that would happen, but not one that I like seeing play out. But yeah, I guess you could see like just a spread pick and roll machine with those 3 guys, Williams as the guy that can really be the pressure point on the rim because of his wingspan, his size, his athleticism, his finishing, and PJ just being the guy that can connect everything and space the floor. Like maybe there's something there, but that seems like absolute best case scenario, and you're not even factoring in the defense at that point either. So I don't know. It's not the type of business that I would want to be in, but Herro's young. She's a big shot maker. He's a talent. So I could get why a team would have some interest in him. And who knows? I'd have to go back to remember if the Hornets maybe kick the can on him in 2019. Like it's largely the same front office that's still there too. Like it's still Mitch Kupchak and Buzz Peterson, making decisions here. So maybe they've had a fondness for him, going back to his Kentucky days.
And we're talking about this like this is an actual possibility, but it feels like Jake Fisher just kind of threw the Hornets in there. Maybe Mitch butt dialed accidentally.
Yeah, his phone was on. I mean, I guess it is technically it's above the belt here. You know what I mean? Like it's not in the moratorium. So Mitch Kupchak would be allowed to have a cell phone on according to NBA rules.
All right, so let's switch it over to Buddy Hield, and this player obviously not linked with Charlotte, to my knowledge, but you had told me about how Zach Lowe did a podcast recently this week, and he threw out an idea about suggesting a trade that would land Buddy Hield in Charlotte. I listened to it this morning. It seems like he was just kind of like rattling off teams, just kind of randomly throwing out packages that could make sense. And with the Pacers not making any headway on an extension with Buddy Hield, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next offseason, and he will be 31 years old. So Herro and Buddy Hield, obviously 3-point shooters. I think Buddy Hield is just probably more of the pure shooter. But you've got a guy that's going to be on a expiring contract, which to me doesn't make a ton of sense for what I think the Charlotte Hornets are trying to do here. You know, Buddy's a guy that probably would be better suited going to a team that is going to be competing, a guy that could provide shooting, which Charlotte needs. Don't get me wrong, but a guy that would be on a playoff rotation. So the idea that Lowe threw out, which I don't even know if Pacers would go for this, Cody Martin and James Bouknight and or Kai Jones. I just don't see the Pacers going for that. I believe they could probably get more. And I guess there's some certainty with Martin, having 3 more seasons compared to Buddy Hield only having this upcoming season. But Book to me really isn't even an asset. Like when you're throwing in Book, I don't know if that really like bumps it up really all that much. So I didn't really spend a ton of time thinking about this, Brian, but I'm just not sure that Charlotte really would be in play for Buddy.
Yeah, that well, first off, just a couple of things. Yeah, like to say like James Bouknight is an asset in distress is like the undersell of the century right now, but if I remember correctly from the 2021 draft, Bouknight is someone that the Pacers had eyes on, and he was a guy that could have been in the late lottery range for them. I think they ended up going Isaiah Jackson, I want to say, but you could see maybe there being some sort of like lingering interest in Bouknight because of that. I could absolutely see Cody Martin being a guy that they like, right? He's a sprint when healthy, he can get out on the break and transition. You could see him getting a couple easy buckets per game by just running with Tyrese Halliburton and grabbing those hit-ahead passes from Hallie. Assuming he continues to shoot the ball, I could see him being like a, kind of a role fit in a lot of places. And he's I guess in the prime of his career. So there's something to be said about that. He brings like a toughness factor. So I could see a lot of teams being like kind of interested in him. I don't know what Bouknight is doing for you other than just like he helps get the salaries in the right range. And maybe there's some type of a flyer like, he gets in Rick Carlisle's system. And even though he's way down the depth chart, like maybe that's the thing. Like Aaron Nesmith did sort of like rehab his career and standing in the league in that system. So, who knows, but I just, Hield is set to make a little over 19 million next season. You put Martin and Bouknight together, that's a little over $12 million in salary. Like it does work. Just those two, like in a 2-for-1, but I'll just be honest, like as far as Hield goes with the roster, I think a lot of the stuff I was just mentioning about the limitations of a hypothetical LaMelo Herro backcourt,
or the limit on defense either.
No, he's not, and he's older, and he's not a guy that you run like a bunch of like spread pick and roll for, and like I know Hield is like a special movement shooter, right? Like I get it. He's like, he's like out, like he's like next to he's behind like only Steph or whatever the last couple of years. And like if you sort for like X number of temps per 36 minutes at above 40% or whatever, like he's an incredible bomber with range that you can leverage that gravity in a bunch of ways. So he becomes a very useful offensive player in the half court just because of like what he can do. And there's so many like guard to guard, like all of the ways that like the Hornets have used Rozier with LaMelo. You could see that happening with LaMelo and Hield, the ghost screens, pistol action, all of the sort of like choreographed after timeout movement sets to get Rozier coming off of screens or flares or pin downs. Like, Hield can slot into all of that, or hypothetically could. But in this hypothetical, you're keeping Rozier. And so just like the backcourt of LaMelo, Rozier, Buddy Hield, who I don't really think you want to play those three guys together. I mean, just the lack of rim pressure, the issues that you would have defensively. This is a poor perimeter defensive unit at the moment, unless Brandon Miller like really, really pops, which we'll see. But they would also be trading away Cody Martin, right? Who we just talked about in the last pod with Spencer, like, you know, pretty solidly like the Hornets' best returning wing defender, best perimeter defender, guard wing defender. So I don't know. It's like I can almost see it like under like Borrego, just because it is so funny to go back and look at some of the lineups the Hornets played, like LaMelo's first two seasons, where it was just like Devontae Graham, Terry Rozier, Miles Bridges, and PJ Washington at the same time, just like pure 5-out, like small ball nirvana. I don't see it as much with Steve Clifford, and I just don't love the fit lineup wise and roster wise with Hield. I guess you're not giving up that much if it's, I mean, like Martin to me is still like a solid player, assuming he's healthy. Book Night, he's shown just so little. And even when he got here, he was not like an incredible pick to begin with. But last thing I want to say on this, and I'd be curious to get your stamp on this too, Richie, but like, I mean this. I really do mean this in nothing but respect, because Zach Lowe he's the best at this. Like, he's entertaining, informative. I've learned an insane amount about basketball reading his columns, listening to his podcasts over the years. Like, he's, in my opinion, he's just like the best sports journalist. He's the best journalist that I've ever read, etc. Like, could not have more respect. Like, I'm using all of that to preface this, but there have been 2 pods of his recently, including this one where he was talking about Cody Martin. And he mentioned that Cody Martin, like the way he phrased it was sort of that, like, oh, Cody Martin like fell out of favor in the rotation last season. It was like he was hurt all of last year. Like, the reason why he fell out of favor with the coaching staff is because he was physically unable to play. This is absolutely a guy that would have like totally endeared himself to the coaching staff last season, and they certainly could have used him. They were having to like go through like Theo Maldone and Bryce McGowan's, who, I mean, I like Bryce McGowan's quite a bit as a young player, but like they're having to lean on those guys, and Kelly Oubre. Like, I promise you, if he was physically able, like Steve Clifford would have been playing this guy a ton last season. And that's not that, like, Lowe had another pod like a week or 2 ago where he did the same. He sort of like couched Martin in the same way. And it's just not an accurate portrayal. It's like a rare miss in terms of like sort of like player evaluation and roster composition from, in my opinion, the greatest to ever do it. But yeah, that's not what happened with Cody Martin last season.
That's funny. When he said that on the pod, when I listened to it today, I thought the same thing. I was like, am I missing something like out of favor? Like, it's not like he sat the bench because he was outplayed by people in front of him. No, he just couldn't play. Like, he was
Kelly Oubre outdogged him in practice. That's why Cody Martin wasn't playing. It wasn't because of nagging injuries that he had for 90% of the season.
Yeah. All right. Just to kind of wrap up this Hield Herro thing, like, I know that you're not in favor of acquiring either. There's plenty of downsides for both. I just would never understand why they would even go after Hield in the first place. I'm not really sure what he does for the Hornets this season, because he's on an expiring. I don't see a whole lot of benefit in going for him. He's getting up there in age. So you probably know where I land. Like, if you were to choose, all things equal, the deal was balanced. Would you rather have Hield on a 1-year contract or Herro for these next 4 years for $120 million? And I know you probably don't want either, but like, just choose, Brian. Just entertain it.
Oh, it's tough because it's a very interesting like sort of like value proposition between like better shooter on a much shorter contract versus Herro, who's younger, in theory could still be getting better, can do more with the basketball, and like may be able to flip him for something else down the line. Like in a year or 2 from now, you might be able to turn him into something. Um, and I think with Hield, you're sort of like whatever players or draft capital you give up, like you're probably not gonna get like whatever you get back is gonna be like whatever Hield gives to you next season. But man, having Tyler Hero at $30 million per season parked on your books for the next 40 years, God, it's tough. I don't really love either. I don't really love either of these. Um, I will say,
Don't do it. Don't do it.
uh, I'll say Healed just because
Okay.
I can get out from underneath it quicker.
Yeah, that's true.
But like it's just tough because if you give up stuff to get him, you know, that stuff's out the door and maybe he helps you a little bit and Charlotte, you know, somehow slides into the playoffs and then loses its first round pick, you know, like yeah, these are like they've none of these are like great options in my opinion. So, and maybe I'm underselling Hero's talent. Like again, he's young, he can run pick and roll, he's a shot maker. Like those guys are you know, technically they don't grow on trees. They're guys that should be valued, but in Hero's a really good shooter. So I don't know. Maybe I'm making the wrong call there, but I just think like I'll use the old adage, the year's not money, right? And so I'll apply it to the fact that I can at least like reset at the guard position after, you know, hopefully after that, as opposed to like sort of like I mean, you still have to figure out what you're doing with Rozier, I guess,
Rozier.
even if you traded for Healed, or who knows, maybe it's like, you know, Healed for Rozier, you know, maybe that's I mean, I don't think that's it, but I guess that's a, you know, somehow a possibility, but I don't know. How do you feel? Which of those two hypotheticals would you take?
No, I would. I mean, I would take Hero. Like I said, I don't know if I would want either of these deals. We've both made the case that it probably doesn't make a ton of sense, but Hero to me is a little bit more intriguing just because of his youth. And I think if all things are equal,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
I'm probably underselling him a little bit. Like he can pass and play make and you can do handoff stuff with him too. I just yeah, maybe I may be wrong about that one. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah.
yeah, we'll see. All right, let's do this in like 3 minutes or less.
Okay.
We have a loyal listener, Keith. He asked a listener question: when healthy, what is the ceiling and what is the floor of this team? And I don't know if he's talking about, you know, wins or if he's talking about the standings in the East, but
Yeah.
if the Hornets are healthy, I still think their floor could be 12th or 13th in the East. I
For
still think
sure.
it's a possibility. And obviously, you know, if other teams are healthy, then it kind of evens it out anyway. So I know that sounds low, but many teams got marginally better in the East. I think that Washington and Detroit really, if all things go the way they're planned, don't have a big shot at passing the
Mhm.
Hornets if the Hornets stay healthy. I think the ceiling of this team, I was just kind of going through the list of teams here, and this, I mean, this sounds actually optimistic in my mind. Like, I feel like top 10 feels optimistic. Like, think about the teams that they would have to pass. Let's just say that the Wizards and Pistons are below them. So that would put them at 13th, but they would
Mhm.
still have to pass the Raptors, the Magic, the Nets, and then they would be 10th or any combination of those teams with the Pacers and the Bulls. Like,
Hmm.
they had to pass like three other teams in addition to the Pistons and the Wizards to kind of get up in that top play in conversation. So, do you see them like being a top 9, 8 team, or do you think they're like a 10 team at best?
I mean, it's amazing. They're just in the same situation again. Like it's just like God, Jesus, man. They just like can't they end up in this pit every year where it's like they could bottom out and be the worst team in the league or like maybe they're like between 9 or 10 in the East, you know.
Yeah,
Um no, I agree. I mean, I think like Washington, you know, Washington's going to be obviously be bad next season. The Pistons, I think, are going to be, you know, they're going to be bad, but I mean, who knows if Cade Cunningham makes a jump, maybe he just raises their floor enough, and all of a sudden, you know, it's a toss up between those two teams for the, you know, 12, 13 spots in the East. But yeah, I mean, I think their floor is like, I think the floor is like 14th in the East.
Okay.
Um, I do think there is some ceiling where they could get to like 8 or 9 and be like at 500, but that's really like that assumes like good health for Gordon Hayward. That assumes you know Bridges comes back and plays well. That assumes Brandon Miller has a good rookie season. Mark Williams makes a jump, and like most importantly, LaMelo makes a big jump. I suppose like we have to rethink the math a little bit if all of a sudden like he's just 10%, 20% better than he was last season, like that does change things a little bit. But in until then, like no, it's hard to see them. The East it's just a lot of good teams. I really think there's only like 1 to 2 obviously bad teams, and I think the Hornets are closer to those teams than they are to like a team like Indiana, that's going to be fighting for a play-in and a playoff spot. Like, the Pacers have a better roster and a really good coach. So I don't know. Where do you have them between like
I would
13 to
say
10,
10 and,
basically?
10 and 13
Yeah.
in the East. So I'm going to be more optimistic on the low end. I don't think they're going to be 14th or 15th. You think that they could potentially be the second worst team in the East?
I do. I think there's I mean, like that would be like Washington worst, obviously, and like the Pistons make some jump and the Hornets have bad injury luck and they regret. You know what I mean? Like something like that. But I guess I should say I think that's the absolute floor.
Right. Right.
But I do think like they're set to win more games next season than the Detroit Pistons.
Mm-hmm. So we wish we could be a little bit more positive, Keith, but we appreciate the question. Thanks again to everyone who joined us live. As always, please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple. Go ahead and review us on those sites as well. Lastly, visit buzzbeat.substack.com for information about our private podcast feed where you can get ad-free episodes and early access to episodes. So we thank you guys again for supporting us and joining us again. For Brian, I'm Richie. We'll talk to you guys